knows about Alabama. Everybody knows about Mississippi. Everybody knows about Mississippi. Oh, that's it.
What a voice.
Oh, yes. Can't go wrong with Nina.
Hey, everyone. Welcome
Hi.
to the second coaching conversation, Purple Coaching Conversations.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anne Helgren, and I'm a relationship coach.
And I'm Tanya, and I am a courage and confidence coach.
It's great to have you here. So today, following on from our last series and our last conversation where we did a bit of an introduction to who we are and what we were doing and what we're trying to get through this series, today is the second part of that series. We'll be having about 6 series to start with. And today's series is focusing on how to have conversations. And these are really like tough conversations, if you like, because again, obviously it's around race and diversity, white privilege, and anything to do with the issues that are being faced by the Black community specifically. And this is following on from George Floyd's death and the Black Lives Matter movement. So, Tanya, I'm going to start with asking you a question, which I think a lot of our viewers, when we spoke, you mentioned something that I found really interesting. And so for those people who didn't listen to the first one, just to let you know, Tanya approached me on the networking group that we belong to. And since then, our conversations have grown. I have to say, Tanya is absolutely amazing in the amount of time she's dedicated to educating herself around issues, around the Black Lives Matter issues, but also just about discrimination, racism in society, white privilege, and so on. And she's expressed to me that she's very more aware and more woke about issues that are affecting society. So my first question to you, Tanya, just before we get into actually having these conversations, perhaps you can tell us a little bit about why now and what is it that made the difference for you to kind of open up your eyes and become curious about finding out more about Black Lives Matter, about issues facing the Black community. Like, I guess my question is, why now? Why after George Floyd's death? I mean, given that Black Lives Matter has been there for a while.
Yeah, thanks, Anne, for this lovely introduction and compliments. So yes, when you asked me this question, I can't help myself but feeling a bit uncomfortable because I've woken up now, and I find it super late, and I feel a bit ashamed of it. I think the fact that I wasn't not inclusive, not discriminating people in my profession or in my life, that I was surrounded by a diverse group of people. I thought that meant I wasn't a racist, and that would be enough to show that I was inclusive. But I think George Floyd kind of shed a light, and by shedding a light, I mean I was completely blind. It's as if I had an opaque mirror in front of me, and George Floyd kind of cleaned it out, and I saw what was really happening in front of me. I understood what it meant to have privilege, and it's a privilege that you're not always aware of it, whether you like it or not. You have privilege as a white person, and I wasn't aware of that until then. And it wasn't until I started reading and listening to experts on diversity and to everything that was happening and the voices of anger that I understood that I wasn't diverse enough and I needed to learn more. And I wasn't surrounded by enough diversity, and in my profession of coaching, it wasn't diverse enough, and I hadn't had teachers that were diverse, and my reading list wasn't diverse, and that clearly I had a lot of blind spots, and And I think that's what George Floyd event made me realize. And I was quite scared, and I wasn't sure where to start. And I think that was the first reaction that I had. But I didn't want to stay in that mindset. And I think one of the first reactions that I had, even before being scared, was feeling a bit ashamed and trying to be a bit defensive, that, oh, by the way, I'm married to someone who's mixed, and sorry, my children are mixed. He's not. Sorry, he's 100% Pakistani. Sorry, mistake here. I'm married to someone who's diverse, and I'm surrounded to a diverse group of friends. But I realized that I just thinking that was enough was being a racist. And it changed my definition. And I was, when I heard words like white supremacy, I felt that it was an attack. But actually, when you know what it really means from race experts, it's just saying that you have privilege over other groups, racial groups. It just means that, and it is true. It is a fact. So just accepting that is what it meant, and how lives could be so different because of your skin color kind of triggered so much injustice inside of me. And I felt I had to do something, and I had to have the conversations. And before having the conversations, I needed to educate myself a little bit more, because I realized from everything I was listening and reading that Black people were tired and upset, and it wasn't new, it was an ongoing thing, and it's been there forever. And I wasn't there to ask them for approval, but or teaching me, but I needed to teach myself.
Yeah, and I think you've brought up a lot of interesting points there as well. Like that feeling of, you mentioned in the beginning, of feeling ashamed that you're just waking up to this. But I think it's so important to emphasize that it's better now than never. It's better to accept whatever it is, whether it's shame or guilt. And again, I'm not saying that it has to be a negative feeling, but just the accepting whatever it is that is coming up, even if it makes you feel uncomfortable, but starting to have the conversations is so important. And I know, Tanya, you'll get into that a bit more in terms of, how to start having these conversations and looking at it from not just from our coach's perspective, which we are, but also for people who are not coaches, just as human beings. How do we have these conversations? The other thing I'd like to carrying on from that, of how to have these conversations, what would you say to other white people who are still in the mindset that no, this whole Black Lives Matter movement is exaggerated, or the issues of injustice and discrimination are being blown out of proportion? And and we have all these people that we love to argue with you online, especially, where they they put out false claims and false stats and talk about things that try to discredit Black Lives Matter movement, or perhaps not those who are that extreme, but perhaps who people just don't get it and don't get what the fuss is, quote unquote fuss. And I've come across these people. I have to say, as a Black woman, sometimes it can be really frustrating trying to have a conversation with someone who's already decided they're not going to have a conversation with you. What would you say as a white person to these people who are still in that era of there is no such thing as racial injustice in our criminal systems, or it's not institutionalized? So yes, there's racist, but as you hear in the US, bad apples with these cops, and it's not an institutional problem. What would you say to people like that?
Those are very uncomfortable conversations to have. But if you learn and read about Black Lives Matters, you're more equipped to answer those sentences that will come up. So, for instance, I had sentences like, I'm not sure I want to bring up Black Lives Matters because it's a political subject. And if I hadn't learned or read about it or educated myself about it, I wouldn't have known what to tell them. And it was very easy to answer that it's not political, it's human. And
Yeah.
And going through the details of what I was discussing before about privilege, what it really means, what white supremacy really means, so that they understand that it's not about calling you out a racist, but it's about seeking to be more inclusive, making it your intention. So I've had those conversations. However, I haven't had the conversation with people that would completely negate it to that extent. It was always that there was always a kind of an educated conversation where the other person was more in the defensive foot, but wasn't completely shut down to having the conversations. So I'm hoping that I'm more equipped for it now. However, I do think that the focus needs to be on people that are willing to have the conversation. So I would want to continue talking to white people who, like me, have had their eyes open or slightly opened, maybe at different stages, because there's all different stages, and making sure that you follow up and you make sure that they are on top of the different topics. You send them links of interesting articles, you schedule calls, and you do follow-ups with people that have shown interest and have felt a little bit ashamed, like I have at the beginning as well. And this is where there is space for dialogue, and you kind of need to tackle those people first, I think, to make sure that then they will be equipped to talk as well to other white people. And even if, like when I spoke about it in a room full of, it was a room with 20 women, 4 of them replied saying, I'm interested, I'd like to hear more. And initially I felt that was a very little result, and I was a bit disappointed. But my husband kind of made me realize that 4 out of 20 is actually very good, because those 4 out of 20, if you follow with them and you talk to them, they will know how to speak, and they might implement also in their businesses the ideas that you're exchanging. So those 4 people might also make sure that the changes happen to 4 other people, and that's how it happens. Change is slow, and you've taught me that. And I think now is kind of the right time to kind of bring back coaching in this topic. And we've created, you and I, a graph on how to have conversations, and I'm going to bring it up now in the screen. Yeah, so this graph is a breakdown of how to have conversation as coaches. So if you want to use the techniques that we've learned in coaching to have conversations like these, it's based on principle of Nancy Kline, which is time to think. So listening to the other person. If you start, for instance, a conversation with somebody else, you kind of start somewhere and you let the other person talk and express and share their feelings and their emotions, and then you kind of pause there and you stay with the not knowing. That's also Nancy Kline approach, but you need to understand what's happening in the room. So what are the emotions the other person is expressing, and what are the emotions that are triggered within you? So when George Floyd happened and I was having those conversations, I felt ashamed, I felt ignorant, I felt defensive. So it was naming those emotions and actually using those emotions as a conversation with you, Anne, and learning together. And there's this fantastic sentence that I love from Glennon Doyle that I thought is is a great representation of what we're trying to do in Purple Coaching Conversation. And she says in her in Untamed, the book, she talks about it becoming the right thing and not saying the right thing. We might not always say the right thing, and we might get criticized for certain things that we're going to say. But what we want, you and I, as coaches and as individuals, humans, is to becoming the right thing. And it's again this concept of Austin Channing, which is becoming better humans. So in that graph, which is how to have conversations as coaches, once you recognize your own emotions that are triggered, you name them to the other person, and that's what I did with you, Anne. And you kind of were you kind of were there for me to listen in the same way as a coaching professional, and that's how you grow and become the right thing together, and you grow together. And the key thing, again, from what I started, is to have follow-up conversations. So we've had follow-up conversations, you and I, right, with certain people. One of them might recognize themselves, and nothing was said with George Floyd in their company, and up until yesterday. And in the last conversation, I was losing patience, and I was thinking to myself, "My God, Anne, you keeping your calm so much." And I asked you, how do you do it? How do you keep your calm when nothing has been done, nothing has been posted, nothing has been expressed? And yes, they say they're working behind the scenes, but being silent is not enough. So, do you want to share with us how you've kept your cool? And
Yeah, I think part of it also is because I'm so used to being on this side of the table, where you're full of frustration, you're waiting for change and it's not coming fast enough, and you're waiting for things to happen and it's just not happening. But also, I think it's also part of my personality that those who know me know that I'm kind of a calm person, though I can be very impatient as well. But one thing I've learned, and especially when it comes to talking about race with people who are not Black, that you've got to take a stance with patience, no matter how frustrating or difficult it might feel. If you want, because it's already a very sensitive topic. It's already a topic that people would rather not talk about, that people would rather tiptoe around, or feel like they're walking on eggshells, afraid to say the wrong thing or get it wrong. So the last thing I want to do is go in like, a bull in a china shop and just be very aggressive about it, no matter even if that's how I feel sometimes inside. But I try and remember that my whole point of having this conversation is for them to understand what it feels like for the Black community to continue living in a society that has so many levels of discrimination and racism, and in so many parts of our society. And I appreciate that, because I appreciate that it can be difficult for some individuals to see this because they've never lived anything else. And while it's not an excuse to why the change has not been made, it is absolutely not an excuse to them. I want to make sure that, okay, fine, you haven't done anything so far. Now let's talk about what you're going to do moving forward. Let's talk about what you're going to start actually doing and saying moving forward. And I find that the best way to get people to do that is to speak to them in a manner that allows them to listen, rather than listen to reply. And then obviously when you're listening to reply, your defense mode goes up. You're not really listening to what I'm saying. You're in that shame defense mode and nothing's really going in. So yeah, that's why I was as calm as I've been in a lot of the situations. It's really about them trying to get them to listen to what is being said, because I know it must feel uncomfortable for a lot of people.
Yeah, even as coaches, I think we always have to remember that that we have similarities. We in as humans, we all have our similarities and our differences, and we kind of need to focus on the similarities. And if the similarities kind of having the mission to do something about it, accepting that it might take time. However, I did mention to that person that I found it was too slow and that something had to be done quicker, sooner rather than later. And holding them accountable for it. Like in coaching, you do that. You hold the client accountable if they've set some goals and they keep procrastinating, right? You make sure you revisit with them. So I think that's what we're trying to say about how coaching can help us having those conversations. So as we're running out of time, I believe it's worth summarizing our session today.
Yes, I think if everyone can just, if we remember one thing we've said for today, I think our main aim was, as we've said, is how to have difficult conversations. And the key things that we'd like you to take away is first, start somewhere. It's not about getting it right. It's not about being wrong or shamed or blamed and so on. Just start having the conversations with people around you, whether they're people of color or not, but open that dialogue. The second thing is to get into the conversation with a curious mind. So you're there to learn something. You're there to learn something that will enrich yourself as a human being, but also enrich your other people around you, that you can then go on and share this, whatever it is that you've learned, and listen. So when we talk about learning, like actively listening, you don't need to be a coach to do that, but just learn stuff without taking a defensive mode, or without just without a defensive mode. And thirdly is, we would really, really like to ask everyone out there to keep having these conversations with other people as well. And this is what we mean by grow. So it's not just about having the conversations with one particular group, but then have it with various other groups. Have it with workmates, with your families, with your, people at church, wherever it is. But let's grow, because for things to change, it has to change as a society as a whole. And it's up to all of us, not just the Black community, not just the white community, but all of us. And I think that's where the real change comes. As you can see from the George Floyd matches across the world, it didn't matter where you were in the world, the change has happened now because everyone got involved. So yeah, that our summary for today's session.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great. And it's very much remembering that I'm saying also as a white person, if you are doing the work, make sure you share the work to as many people as you can, because you'll be surprised who might say, oh, I'm curious, I want to know more. Sometimes it might be friends that you thought would never actually have a sensibility to this topic, and actually are more sensitive than you think they are. So giving the chance to everyone to be part of the conversation, to your friends, your cousins, your parents, and your colleagues, kids, and we'll talk about parenting more. We have a fantastic website, and it's Purple Coaching Conversations. Please go have a read, check our blogs and different videos on the topic, get in touch with us, and there'll be all the details of our social media on there. And don't hesitate to ask us any question or any topic you want us to talk about. And if you want to be a guest on our show, that we will do a next series with guests, please get in touch with us.
Yes. And on that note as well, with our website, we've got resources on there as well. So we've got videos, books. Tanya's been fantastic with gathering a really extensive list of resources for people to use to help educate themselves as well. And of course, share the links, share the videos as well with your friends and family and everyone else around you as well. So yes, do check us out.
Looking forward to our next sessions. And,
yes.
And thanks for joining us.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely day.
Bye.